Disney's Brave. Long ago, in the Scottish Highlands, there was a kingdom called Dunbroch. King Fergus and Queen Eleanor ruled over the land. They had 3 sons, triplets named Harris, Hubert, and Hamish, and a daughter named Merida. Every day, Queen Eleanor spent hours teaching Merida how a princess should behave. But Merida refused to listen. She preferred to spend time with her horse, Angus, and practice archery. One day, Queen Eleanor announced that suitors from 3 Highland clans would be visiting Dunbroch to compete for Merida's hand in marriage. Merida was horrified. "I won't go through with it," she shouted. Queen Eleanor told Merida a legend about an ancient prince who had refused to follow his kingdom's traditions. The kingdom had fallen. "Legends are lessons," the queen warned. Soon, the clan's ships sailed into Dunbroch. The royal family greeted their visitors in the great hall. Lords Mackintosh, MacGuffin, and Dingwall stepped forward to present their firstborn sons. As Queen Eleanor explained the rules of the competition, Merida grew interested. It was up to her to choose the sport. "I choose archery," she cried. The next day, the crowd watched as the suitors competed. Young MacGuffin and young Mackintosh barely hit their targets, but wee Dingwall hit the bull's-eye. Just then Merida appeared on the field. "I'll be shooting for my own hand," she declared. Merida took aim. 1, 2, 3 arrows hit bull's-eyes. Merida was thrilled until a furious Queen Eleanor dragged her back to the castle. "You embarrassed them," the queen shouted at Merida. "When they were alone, you embarrassed me." But Merida did not care. She was too angry. She slashed at the family tapestry with a sword, splitting it in half. Before Queen Eleanor could say another word, Merida ran out of the castle. She jumped onto Angus and raced into the forest. As Merida rode through the woods, a trail of blue lights appeared. Merida had never seen the legendary will-o'-the-wisps before. Enchanted, she followed them to a small cottage. An old witch lived inside. Merida asked for a spell to change her mother, and the witch reluctantly gave her a small magic cake. Merida eagerly returned to the castle. She was sure the cake would change her mother's mind about the marriage. Eleanor was relieved to see Merida safe. She happily took the cake, but after one bite, she began to feel ill. Dodging King Fergus and the lords, Merida led her mother up to the room. Merida tucked Eleanor into bed. A few minutes later, a giant bear rose from the sheets. The queen had been transformed. Merida had to get her mother out of the castle. Her father had hated all bears, since a giant one named Mor'du had taken his leg. With her brother's help, Merida led Eleanor down the steps into the forest. Merida knew she had to find the witch. She led her mother to the cottage, but there was no one there. In the witch's cauldron, Merida found a message. "Fate be changed. Look inside. Mend the bond torn by pride." Suddenly, a white cloud filled the air. When it cleared, everything inside the cottage was gone. Merida and Eleanor were on their own. Merida and Eleanor spent the night in the witch's cottage. In the morning they were hungry. Merida taught Eleanor how to catch fish. The two played and splashed together in the river. For the first time in a long while, mother and daughter enjoyed each other's company. Later, Merida and Eleanor searched the forest for wisps. Suddenly, a blue trail appeared. Merida and Eleanor followed the trail to an ancient castle. Inside, Merida noticed claw marks on the walls. She recalled her mother's story. Merida realized the prince in the story had been turned into Mor'du. At that moment, Mor'du appeared. The bear lunged at Merida. The queen pulled the princess out of reach just in time, and Merida and her mother raced away from the ruined castle. As Merida looked at her mother, she realized what the witch's message had meant. She had to mend the family tapestry she had torn. That was the only way to save Eleanor. Merida snuck her mother back into the castle. In the great hall, the clans were fighting. Merida had to do something. The queen feels in her heart that we should be free to follow our own hearts and find love in our own time, she announced. Moved by Merida's words, the lords agreed that Merida and the young men should be free to marry whomever they wished. Merida and Eleanor raced upstairs to get the tapestry, but Fergus had smelled a bear. He burst into the room. Eleanor panicked and ran down the stairs. The clans close behind. Merida tried to explain that the bear was Eleanor, but Fergus didn't believe her. He locked Merida in the tapestry room to keep her safe, then went off to hunt the bear. Merida had to get out. Through the window in the door, she spotted 3 little bear cubs. It was the triplets. They had eaten the magic cake and turned into bears too. The triplets freed their sister, and all 4 jumped in onto Angus. The cubs held the reins while Merida mended the tapestry. Merida found the hunters in a clearing in the forest. They had captured Eleanor. Merida pulled out her sword. She wouldn't let her father hurt her mother. Suddenly, Mor'du burst into the clearing. As he closed in on Merida, Eleanor broke free of her ropes. She slammed Mor'du against a giant stone. The great rock broke apart, crushing the bear. The battle won. Merida wrapped the mended tapestry around Eleanor, but nothing happened. "I don't care what you are," she cried. "You're still my mum. I love you." Merida buried her face in Eleanor's fur and wept. She knew what had happened was her fault. She just hoped she wasn't too late to fix it. As dawn began to break, Merida felt a hand stroke her hair. She looked up and saw her mother smiling down at her. The triplets had turned back into boys too. The bond between mother and daughter had been repaired. The spell was broken. Fergus looked at his family in amazement. Then, with a loud laugh, he scooped them up into his arms. The whole family was happily together again. Back at home, Merida and Eleanor began a new tapestry. This one showed the challenge they had faced and overcome together. Later, they watched as the clans sailed for home. Eleanor knew Merida would marry someday when she was ready, and Merida knew that she didn't want to change anything about her mother. She loved the queen just the way she was. The end.